Now, back to that Kevin Show with Kevin McCullough.
All right, Kevin McCullough, last few minutes with Andrew Biggio. The Rifle 2 is the name of the book, Back to the Battlefield. And again, friends, if you would like to see some of these very sites that we're talking about, places where these stories took place, come with us. We're going to go to World War II's kind of most legendary spots in Europe. We'll start in London, where Churchill and Eisenhower kind of made the final decisions on D-Day. You know, they had a stop and start, and weather was a mess, and there was a whole story behind how they even got it launched. But then after we spend a day or two in London, we'll head to Portsmouth. We'll cross the channel very similarly to the way the young men did, although we'll be in a much nicer cruiser than they were. They were in very tough military crewed boats, and this will be a much more enjoyable experience. But then when we land in Normandy, we're going to spend a few days going to the different landing sites. We're going to go to where the paratroopers dropped. We're going to see some of the most famous sites. You know, the church where the guy got caught and his parachute didn't open. We'll see that. And we'll spend time with some of the locals that Andrew was talking about, who to this day are extremely grateful for the U.S. and what we did in liberating Europe. And then we'll head down to Paris and close off the trip with a very nice couple of nights in the City of Light, and not the least of which will be a dinner cruise on the Seine River before we return home. Andrew, battles change, technologies change. There's something about war that is awful for the participants in just about every generation that serve. But we as a culture, as a society, as a world, have kind of looked at the World War II service personnel, and we've labeled them the greatest. You served in Iraq. You saw live action. What is it about that generation that set them apart, do you think, in your mind, from other chapters that we've lived through?
Yeah, so another thing I was trying to investigate is that, a lot of veterans post World War II, we live in the shadows of the greatest generation. They had the war that was good versus evil, apparently black and white. But you know what? It was like,
and it was enormous good versus enormous evil. I mean, it was like the stakes were, we all become socialist Nazis, or we let freedom live. I mean, it really was like, the pinnacle of those two ends.
Yeah, and especially with at the finish line, the liberation of the concentration camps, sitting with these 300 World War II veterans and such, I think I felt a lot of them didn't feel like they were the greatest generation, and that some of them, and that we as the United States did some not so great things to win World War II that would put a lot of GIs and soldiers in jail today if they were doing the same things the guys were doing in the Pacific to take these islands. And they gave me a sense of normalcy. A lot of these veterans I sat down personal with that, didn't want to die with their secrets, I guess, 80 years later. But particularly, I think why they're the greatest generation is because there was 16 million World War II veterans. The U.S. government gave out 16 million World War II victory medals. And what that meant was your postman was a World War II veteran, your policeman was a World War II veteran, your doctor was a World War II veteran, the news anchor was a World War II, the politicians were World War. Everybody were World War II generation. I mean, it was an entire generation, top to bottom. We don't have that these days. It's less than 1% of the population serve in a volunteer military, not a draft. So they were just overwhelmed by the numbers, and what they were able to do. Us today as veterans are trying to keep what they built alive with these American Legion posts as VFWs, even just laws and language of legislation to keep veterans benefits. They had no problem passing veteran benefits back then because everybody in Congress was a vet almost, or everybody voting was a veteran, the support, the constituents were veterans. So that's why they were the greatest generation. They set up so much for our future, and I hate to see it get reversed.
We have a few that have served in the military that are in Congress now, some that have, post Iraq and Afghanistan. And it's interesting to see those servicemen come to Congress because they do push for different priorities in some instances, ones that haven't been pushed for a long time, specifically as it affects the veterans. Are you hopeful that America is still grateful for the service of the men and women in uniform?
Yeah, I am. And I think that has a lot to do with the generations before us. I think a lot of people saw that we ran to the recruiting stations during 9/11, which was like our Pearl Harbor. We didn't get the end result that we should have gotten, that so many veterans did fight for and win, and blood, sweat, and tears, and sacrifice their lives. I think that is an absolute underlined 5 times government failure on the way that ended, or could have ended.
Travesty.
And so, yeah, absolutely. It bothers me just to even think about it. And but I think the general public and the people who see us actually have admiration for those who wanted to serve for the right purposes.
Yeah, no, I agree with you on that. Andrew Biggio is our guest, and the book is The Rifle 2, Back to the Battlefield. What's your hope for when people read this? What do you want them to take away from reading The Rifle 2?
The Rifle 2, so, Rifle 1, I wrote about why they are the greatest generation. And Rifle 2, I wrote about those who had a little bit more of a bumpy road coming home after World War II. Guys who fell through the cracks, but were able to turn their lives around. So I want a lot of young veterans to see that they don't have to live in the shadows of the greatest generation, that those guys weren't always perfect also. And I want civilians to remember our World War II veterans before they're all gone.
Yeah, I think that is so important and so vital. Both of my grandfathers served. They were U.S. Navy attached, but they served. They came home. They hardly ever talked about it. Even as I wanted my grandfather to tell me more about it as I was growing up, his later years, it was just the hardest thing to do to get him to. But that was kind of indicative of the humility and of the, I don't know, just the way that generation carries itself. They didn't seek glory. They very much thought that they had to do what they needed to do for the right outcome. And we would be a different nation today if they had not served and won that war. The Rifle 2, Back to the Battlefield is the book. Andrew Biggio, thank you so much. And we'll talk to you again down the road.
Thank you for having me.
You got it. Kevin McCullough coming right back. Don't go away.
Ready or not, he'll be right back. That Kevin.